I always struggle with new audiences, that there's people that know my work deeply and some of you have never seen it. I always struggle whether to be more accurate or more helpful. And I'm going to lean towards being accurate. And it's going to be a whirlwind. I have almost 200 slides. It'll probably be a little less than an hour, but rather than just do a subset of it that misses the hologram of the whole story, I'm going to tell a story of the human predicament of where we find ourselves now, and then leave some room at the end to talk about direction. And then we can mingle upstairs with snacks and such. And I will do a remote Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to do these 5 sections: introduction, the human ecosystem, the superorganism, implications, ways forward. Sorry, this is from last night for people. Introduction. So in order to diagnose the patient, which is our global biosphere and human economy, we first have to know what's wrong. And I have concluded that a lot of people are aware that something's wrong, but they don't use a systems lens. And so we have to look at how the parts and the processes fit together in order to know which pathways remain open and which are dead ends. So we have a lot of experts, especially in the academy and at universities, that are really, really knowledgeable about one thing. But if you fly up high enough, there are so many of this disparate expertise that these people rarely talk to each other, which is one of the real highlights of a place like the Gund Institute, where you have multidisciplinary people sharing insights and creating a broader lens. But basically our culture is represented today where generalists are not wanted or rewarded. So we have islands of expertise separated by oceans of nonsense. Okay, the human ecosystem. This is really not what's taught in economics textbooks, but after 20 years of learning from John and Josh, this is my conclusion of how things fit together. We take ideas and then we take energy and materials to create technology and innovation. We represent that by dollars. We do this to get the feelings of our successful ancestors, and the whole thing produces waste. And we repeat that over and over. So I'm going to first talk about energy. Come on in. First talk about energy. Our culture ignores energy, basically. But energy is necessary for every single product that contributes to economic output in the world. Inventing, mining, creating, manufacturing, delivering, processing, packaging, repairing, maintaining, all that. Every step requires energy. The average home in the United States has 60 devices plugged in 24/7. And even when they're turned off, that's 11% of our electricity is lost that way. So we are awash in energy, and we don't think about it. We think about the devices, not the energy powering them. This is me on my farm. I do the work on a good day of about 1/10 of a horse. Eric Garza has heard this slide 46 times already, so I'll go through it quickly. This is my horse, Binga, who now is 21, and she's a draft horse and does the work on a good day of 1 horse. This is my utility vehicle, which can do the work of 45 horses. This is my truck with a little bit of diesel fuel, can do the work of 300 horses. On the airplane I took to Montreal 2 days ago, imagine 100,000 horses pulling that across the sky. That's the amount of energy dense power that is in jet fuel, which comes from oil. A barrel of oil has 5.7 million BTUs of energy, which is 1,700 kilowatt hours worth of work potential. You can all find this online in a 2-minute Google search. Relative to any of us, we do 0.6 kilowatt hours per day of work. So the math of that is a barrel of oil does 4.5 years of our physical work, and that's what powers the machines around the world. So the human economy uses 100 billion barrel of oil equivalents of the main 3 fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas every year. So if you do the math of that, that's 450 billion human worker equivalents are powering our global economy relative to around 5 billion real humans. So this is the story of industrialization, as we added vast amounts of fossil energy, which we extracted from the ground for pennies on what it really contributes, to replace tasks that humans used to do manually or with draft labor. Look at the spinning loom that only a few people had to do because of the electricity that allowed these looms to be more productive. Steam engine, and now there are many projects and processes around the world that are very energy intensive because this stuff was so cheap. Vermont cow milking example. If you hand milk a cow, it takes around 30 minutes and you make around $5 an hour. This is about 10 years old, this slide, but it's very important conceptually. If you use electronic built machinery, you only need about 7 minutes per cow, but your profits go up to $20 an hour because you much less human labor required. You're having the machines do the work. Or a fully automated system, which is only 3 minutes per human, but you need 400 times more energy than a person. And so what this does is it raises the profits or the wages or reduces the price of milk or some combination. But what ends up happening when energy prices increase? The blue is what I just showed you. When energy prices double to 10 cents, no change in the hand milking example, because you're not using any external energy. You have a slight loss in profit in the intermediate example, but a big drop in profit on the heavy industrial use that requires a lot of fossil energy. What is worse is when energy prices triple, which we really haven't seen in our lifetimes. The drop here is noticeable, but now a lot of industrial processes that have been built and created around cheap energy now operate at a loss. This is what's happening in Germany and Europe because of the Russian cessation of the gas pipelines. They're slowly deindustrializing because energy is too expensive to run the processes they used to have. So what this whole thing has done is boosted our wages, boosted our profits, reduced the price of stuff, and had more economic growth available for more people. How many people? This has also contributed to a massive population spike in the last 150 years. We're now at 8 billion humans. And those humans, per human, on average, consume significantly more than they did 200 years ago. Today's average human is 14 times as materially wealthy as the average human in the year 1800. And today's people in North America are 50 times as materially wealthy as 200 years ago. If you combine those 2 points, number of humans times consumption per human, the human economy is now 1,000 times bigger than it was 5 centuries ago. Okay, well, you all are at the Gund Institute, but if you were in a standard economics class, they would teach you that $1,000 worth of fossil energy is worth $1,000 worth of anything else, pencils, crayons, cupcakes, bike helmets, etc. The dollar cost of energy is its value in the economic system. But one more thing, standard economics textbooks show that humans demand things, corporations get the signal of that demand, and it creates this virtuous cycle of a market for goods and services. This is taught in Econ 101, but it neglects both the source of the main input to this process, which is fossil carbon and non-renewable minerals, and the sink. We hardly pay for the cost of pollution at all. So we conflate the dollar value of energy with the work value that it provides our societies, and we don't include the cost of pollution for the most part. Our culture, which includes our business schools and our universities and our politicians and our aspirations, are energy blind. We don't see the sea of energy that we swim in. From a species level perspective, we've been a modern species, Homo sapiens, for 300,000 years. One day it might be seen that this amount of carbon that we are pulling out of the earth millions of times faster than it was sequestered by daily photosynthesis and then fell to the bottom of the ocean, and now we're pulling it out in oil and gas, is going to be a blip, the carbon pulse. This is a 20,000 year view, and here's more of a several 100-year view of the carbon pulse, of which we are all alive during. We're alive somewhere during the yellow star and the red star. From a climate perspective, we hope we're at the red star because we want emissions to start coming down. From an economic perspective of convenience, comfort, and stability, we hope we're at the yellow star because this stuff is these 450 billion fossil helpers are supporting our global way of life. How much oil is left? Depends. This graph shows what the drill baby drill crowd like to advertise as US oil peaked in 1970. We hit a 40-year decline, and then technology overcame the problem because there was high price signals and the market provided. True with an asterisk, and the asterisk is this. This is the same graph broken out by geological province. The green represents the conventional oil in the lower 48 states. The yellow is part of the United States, but not contiguous part. It's separated by the country of Canada. Blue is not even on land, it's under the ocean. And the red is the tight oil, also called shale oil. That is the source rock. That is where all the other oil originated from. There's nothing left after tight oil. And most of the growth has been tight oil. Tight oil depletes at 80 to 90% in the first 18 months. This chart shows, and no one has seen this chart because I just added it 2 hours ago. This chart shows all of the wells drilled in the United States before 2014 and their production, how much it declines over time. These were all the wells drilled in 2014. The blue is 2015, 2016, 2019, etc. And what ends up happening is the new wells are declining much faster than the old production. So we're having to run faster just to stay in place. If we stop drilling in the United States for environmental reasons, for climate reasons, for financial reasons, for cultural reasons, any reason at all, our oil production would decline 37% in the first year and another 25% the year after. So what ends up happening is shale oil was this a miracle of technology that we were able to develop, this fracking. But the reality is that it was basically a larger straw that accessed a little bit more oil, yes, but mostly it accessed the existing oil faster, and we were getting liquid out of the straw, but we were that much closer to the slurping sound. But we don't hear it because there's still liquid coming out. Okay, there's a lot of talk about renewable energy in the world. And there's even a world expert in renewable energy in this room, believe it or not. I have a few comments about this. First of all, renewable is a misnomer. It's a meme. Because a oak tree is renewable. A chicken is renewable if they find another chicken. But solar panels and wind turbines are really complicated machinery that require global complex supply chains and silicone and lithium and all kinds of rare minerals, and they need to be replaced in 20 or 25 years. So they're better called rebuildable than renewable. Secondly, renewable energy is mostly electricity. Electricity is very powerful, but 80% of global energy use is non-electric. So there are things that we do in our global system. This has to do with the concept of energy properties, which is a unit of energy doesn't do the same work as another unit of energy. So there are things that we can switch to electric, and there are things that we might invent new processes that use electric, but it's not a total plug and play. The invisible but soon shrinking support of the carbon pulse. What will technology and renewables do when coal, oil, and natural gas are on the downslope? That's an important question. Higher full system costs means lower energy benefits. As energy gets more expensive, that ripples through the entire system. If oil was $200 a barrel, that would mean wind and solar and everything in this global supply chain would be more expensive. A lot of people are choosing to buy electric vehicles because it's better for climate change, because we're presumably going to use less gasoline. But every barrel of oil has actually 6,000 products in it. Gasoline is just one of them. There's diesel, there's jet fuel, there's plastic precursors, paint, medical devices, medicine, tires, asphalt that the roads are made from. This all comes from a barrel of oil. Gasoline is just one of it. It's the biggest part. It's around 38 to 40%. But when we reduce our demand for gasoline, unless we have a systems perspective and reduce our demand for all these other things, we're still going to demand the oil. And by the way, the plastics in Asia is the big growth market for oil demand. So far, the energy transition we hear about in the news has been more of an energy addition. This shows global energy use the last 200 years, biomass in green, then coal, then oil, then gas, then nuclear, hydropower, and renewables on top. We are using more biomass today globally than we were in 1800. And Vermont was clear-cut in the 1850s and 1860s, so we're using more wood globally. So new energy sources are additive. We're growing renewable energy faster than we're growing our fossil energy, but we're still growing fossil energy at an absolute level more. We just hit an all-time high in coal production in China. India is announcing they're doubling their coal production by the year 2030. Okay, briefly on materials. You all have probably seen this graph. Energy and GDP are 99% correlated. Materials and GDP are 100% correlated. So GWP, gross world product, the red line, is very, very linked to the biophysical footprint, which is energy and materials. We're growing CO2, we're growing renewables faster than we're growing the economy, which is why this is also growing, but growing at a lower rate. But they're really linked. Decarbonization, which is a massive shift to renewable energy, is going to lead to rematerialization because of all the copper and wiring and minerals. But a lot of these minerals are in countries that are increasingly antagonistic to the global north for good reason. They also have higher wet bulb temperatures, there's civil strife. There's already issues in these countries where they don't want the global north to mine and extract these important minerals. And by the way, I should say, because I don't think the graph is in here, the amount of built infrastructure from humans in the world today, which is our buildings, our roads, our trucks, our skyscrapers, all of that, outweighs all the living things on Earth. Not animals, just grass, trees, forests, everything. So the human our stuff outweighs life. So every unit of GDP requires three things: energy, materials, and information. There is no exception. And I could add dollars as well. So what about technology? Well, there are two types of technology. Type one is making energy or technology more energy efficient, like making a coal plant generate more electricity with the same amount of coal, or finding a new solar development that makes solar panels with some new chemical formula that's better. The second type of technology is things that humans do to replace what animals and humans used to do by themselves with machines, or new resource conversions like a cell phone that has Instagram or TikTok, things that we never had before. The thing is that this type 2 technology dominates how much technology is invented every year. And then all these devices next year have a higher baseline demand for more energy, which goes back to one of the early slides about the 60 things in our houses. Humans are innovators. We will always be innovators. The question now is, are we innovating the right things? But over the last 200 years, we've gotten 1.2% more efficient in how we use energy every single year. That's the energy intensity of GDP has declined from 90% over that time. That's good, right? Well, during that time, if we map how energy efficient we've gotten, we use more and more energy. So since 1990, our energy efficiency, our innovators, our tech inventors have gotten 36% more efficient, but we use 63% more energy. This is called the backfire effect. Okay, briefly about money. Economic textbooks teach us that money is lent from existing capital in the banking system. This is incorrect. And I said this in 2006 when I was here, and then 10 years later, the Bank of England wrote a report that verified it. So I feel vindicated about that. The reality is that 80% of our money is lent into existence when a bank makes a loan. And if you want to know more about that, talk to this guy, Josh. Banks don't lend money, they create it, which has massive implications for ecological economics. Because when money comes into existence, it financially balances. The assets and the liabilities are the same in a double entry system. But what it neglects is the same amount of oil, the same amount of trees, the same amount of dolphins existed as 10 minutes earlier. So there are more financial claims on the same amount of biophysical resources. All right, so this is a conceptual long-term graph. Humans over time invented things and we spread around the earth and we harness the biogeochemical flows of the sun, the soil, and the rain. This is a different sort of graph, a Gaussian curve, which is we found something that's non-renewable and it was really good. And so we wanted more of it and we developed technology and eventually we got the apples from the bottom of the tree and then we had to go to the top of the tree and it follows this sort of curve, a Gaussian curve like the oil, the carbon pulse. A third sort of curve is a human construction, which is we create these digits or these pieces of linen and paper that represent a claim on energy and stuff. So banks create this money in kind of an unlimited graph. So if you structure all these together with access to these flammable fossils, our system grew so fast and large that the early economists could no longer explain wealth by land or land productivity. And they changed the explanation in the economic textbooks to capital and labor. They didn't include energy or these non-renewables at all. And we used the social construct of credit. We pulled resource consumption forward in time. And we create debt much faster than we create GDP or resources. So we're creating money like this, but our underlying reality is like this. We're increasing our debt globally we're doubling our debt globally every 8.5 years, and we're doubling our GDP, which is the income stream needed to service the debt, every 25 years. And this is while we're still growing. So in the past 10 years, government debt has grown 60%, corporate debt 50%, household debt is 40%, and that's outdated. Household debt is skyrocketing in the United States right now because people are taking out credit card loans to pay for things. So this was the old reality when debt didn't matter. And this is a new reality. The United States is adding $1 trillion in debt every 4 months. We have the most trusted currency in the world, so it's okay, right? It's okay for now. So what's happening is we're increasing our claims on biophysical reality at the same time that our biophysical reality is starting to flatline and decline. If you have some dollar bills in your wallet or in your bank account, that is a claim on energy. When you spend those dollars, it will be spent on something requiring energy. So debt is a claim on future energy. And so what's happening is the delta between what people think they own and what the biophysical world can provide is widening. So we're papering over our problems with more and more credit while the energetic and material basis for our currencies deplete. Okay, pollution. You're all ecological economics students, so you know a lot of this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on climate. The situation is not good, but it's not just climate. We've lost 70% of the population of animals since I've lived on this planet. Sperm count is dropping 1.5 to 2% a year, both in humans and in non-humans because of endocrine disrupting chemicals, because of pesticides and other things. Right now, 0.5% of our brain by weight is microplastics. We're losing insects at 1 to 2% a year. We don't even know because there's not enough scientists really tracking it. So it's not just climate, but the externalities are massive and increasing, and they're not part of our economic system. Feelings. We go through, well, this is an evolutionary tree of all of the other cousins, nieces, nephews in nature that we're related to. Humans are way down here on the evolutionary tree, but we come from the same tree of life as everything else. And what we're doing right now in Burlington, Vermont, with all the hotels and the coffee shops and the discos and all the cool things, well, maybe there's not a disco, but yeah. I mean, we're getting the same dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin of our successful ancestors in a wildly different circumstance. So human behavior is central to this story. Humans are intensely social and status conscious. We really care about what others think about us. In fact, last night I gave a talk to investors. Money is only the proximate reason why they're doing these big investments. It's social approval and status and acceptance, which is the ultimate driver. This is a Tiger Woods, who's a billionaire. His yacht pulls into a marina, and his ex-wife's boyfriend's yacht is in a marina, and it's bigger than his. He's a billionaire, but on a relative basis, he probably feels like crap. So sexual selection continues to be a driver in our behavior. What's your name? Supernormal stimuli, which is where our brains get hijacked into thinking we're doing something that contributes to our tribe and our fitness, but we're really just playing a video game in our mom's basement, accessing a coal-fired server. There's a lot of things that we get the reward without doing the work, like pornography or gambling or Facebook, where we do something, and instead of actually getting the physical reward that led to our evolutionary fitness, we're just getting the neurotransmitters. We're turning billions of barrels of ancient sunlight into microliters of dopamine. And this is important because this is a graph from Robert Sapolsky. We live in a consumer world, and we're disconnected with the rewards. So we get a signal, a sound, an advertisement or whatever, and that causes a longing. And then we go and buy something and our dopamine goes down. So our motivation happens when we want something, but once we have it, we no longer get that feeling, that dopamine, that reward. So what ends up happening, this is a picture of my storage shed, the ghost of dopamine past. It's like 15 years of crap that I haven't even been there since 2022. And what ends up happening is the wanting, culture-wide, and we're exporting this dynamic to the global south as well. The wanting is a stronger emotion than the having. I feel very badly about giving talks to this to young humans because this is really overwhelming, but this actually is one thing that you can change right now in your life, because us old people, our neurocircuitry is already set. You can understand this and apply it to your own lives, and I'm going to talk about that near the end. So our brains, as primates who descended from the Pleistocene, are flow-based, but the world is stock-based. And I know this cold because I used to manage money for billionaires on Wall Street. And they're like, I have $500 million. As soon as I get to 600 million, I'm quitting. I'm buying an island, I'm quitting. When they got to 600 million, their buddies had 800 million, and it was a game that they wanted to get more and more, and the digits didn't matter as long as they were more. This is a profound microcosm of our global economic system. But I will say that 2 weeks ago, I was in California, and there was a billionaire who was Obama's chief technology officer. He created a new healthcare company, and in the bylaws of the company, all of his profits from this investment, which is going to be in the billions, are going to be allocated to solving the meta crisis by law. So there are things like that that are changing in the zeitgeist. Real quickly, our brains think in things that can't manifest in the real world. We can imagine millions of sentences with our words and our images that don't match with reality. The virtual world of our minds doesn't match with, which is why there's so many stories on Twitter and elsewhere about a renewable 100% future at a higher economic growth rate for centuries, and it's just delusional. We have in-group and out-group bias. We quickly and strongly form groups, and we defend and support groups that tend to ostracize and root against other groups, and that could be 2 or 3 people, or a city, or a university, or a country. We are ultra-social, which is incredibly social. Jonathan Haidt says we're 90% primate and 10% social insect. So we coordinate with others in many ways the same as social insects. This means that our behaviors are plastic. This is also good news. It means that cultural evolution can happen way faster than individual evolution. Okay, so tying this all together, the economic superorganism. This is our system, and this thing grows over time. So you all know about starlings. You've seen these flocks in the sky. They follow 3 simple rules. Do what your neighbor does. Don't fly too close, but fly towards the center. And the emergent property of following those simple rules is something called a murmuration that looks like this. Humans also follow 3 simple rules in our modern economy. We coordinate towards acquiring surplus, which means wages and profits and jobs. We spend the surplus and we pursue culturally accepted behavior. And those simple rules have resulted in something that looks very much like an anthill or a termite mound. This is an aerial view of Tallahassee, Florida. So this is an aerial view of Los Angeles, and the brake lights and the headlights of cars and trucks are not too dissimilar than the veins and the arteries of a human body. Yet the hemoglobin they're transporting is happening with gasoline and diesel fuel that comes from oil. This happens at a global basis. It happens at an increasing rate every year. So my last academic paper I ever wrote, probably will be the last one I ever write, was called Economics for the Future Beyond the Superorganism. Global human culture is functioning as an energy dissipating structure, like a mindless superorganism that only looks for more energy and stuff, and it cannot value the things that we value. So we have, from this perspective, trying to mitigate climate change within our current cultural goals and economic structures is like arguing with a forest fire. There is no one driving the bus, not politicians, not the rich and powerful, because we've outsourced our wisdom to the financial market. And now the financial market, just like the Borg in Star Trek, many of you probably too young, don't know what that is. It's like beyond our control and is just hungry. This is a serious, serious observation on the global economy, which is why Kamala Harris and others are very actively promoting climate policies, but on the other end, they're also supporting new oil and gas leases and backtracking on that because we need the spice. So just like shale technology functioned as a larger straw, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence in the news. AI, under our current economic system, is also going to act as a larger draw on energy and environment, because if it manifests the way that some people say, it's going to make all the processes more efficient. It's going to make us better at accessing more resources. It's going to have productivity, which will probably not be shared equally, that is re-put into the system. So it will be a larger straw for power and dollars, and ecosystems will take it on the chin. If any of you are interested in this, I did a 3-hour podcast on AI and the superorganism with Daniel Schmachtenberger. It's really scary. Okay, implications and scenarios. Under this framing of the superorganism, and this is Nate's opinion now, and I'm open to changing my mind, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think of the future as a probability distribution that changes every day. But growing the economy and mitigating climate change in the 6th mass extinction, unlikely to happen. Growing the economy by replacing fossil fuels with renewable, not going to happen. Culture en masse choosing to leave fossil carbon in the ground, not going to happen. Governments embracing physical limits to growth before limits to growth are well past. Okay, under this framing, what is likely to happen? A growth in more gross energy as we recognize how important energy is to our lives, while the net energy declines. And I'll explain that in a little bit more later. Massive monetary creation and financial market support by central banks and governments, wider and deeper poverty globally and inequality, and in the US. AI accelerates energy environmental problems, a rightward shift in politics. Why is that? Because as economic growth wanes, people want to be the way that they used to be, and there will be people promising, let's go back to the way things used to be, and progressives want new ways, and conservatives want to be the way that they used to be. And I'm not predicting anything about the United States, but in Europe, there's been a distinct rightward shift in the last couple of years. A reduction in global environmental regulations. When there was an economic crisis in Greece in 2008, they had to hire armed guards to block the northern forest because people wanted to take the forest down to burn for firewood. Pedal to the metal until we hit a wall. All right, there's 4 broad categories of future scenarios. One is green growth, which I think is so unlikely that I'm not going to talk about it. The second is the Mordor economy, which is a play on the Lord of the Rings, which means we're going to continue to grow because we will find some new productivity, we'll find some new energy sources, we'll use artificial intelligence But what will happen is we'll direct more and more of our energy and materials to the energy and materials sector of the economy, leaving less for universities, hospital, health spas, Disneyland, and things like that, because the energy and mining sector will take more and more of that energy, and we'll need to use some of our money and energy to remediate environmental problems like hurricanes and floods and droughts and such. So this is what I refer to as the Mordor economy. And let me give you a history. Some of you, well, probably not any of you, but some of you might be saying, Josh and John invited this Malthusian to this lecture. Thomas Malthus lived 200 years ago, and he incorrectly stated that the exponential growth in population and demand for food would outstrip the geometric creation of the food. He was wrong, because he didn't know about mining underneath the earth and adding this fossil productivity from ancient carbon to our farming system. Paul Ehrlich, 1969, wrote a book called The Population Bomb, saying many of the same things. He was wrong, at least about that, because we went to globalization and outsourced to the areas of least cost production and debt. We've increased debt since 1969 more in every single year in the United States and globally than we've increased the size of our economy. So we're growing debt really much faster than our economy. And because of that, we had more growth. In 2009, we had the great financial crisis. And what happened then is the central banks took over the role of money creation from the commercial banks and kicked the can yet again. To 2020, we had COVID, when the central banks again had to do this stimulus bazooka package and guaranteeing of all things. How many more cans are there to kick? There may be some. But the math is that every time we grow 3%, we double our energy and material use in the next 25 years or 30 years. So you all are 20 years old or whatever. By the time you're 80, if under our current trend, there will be a quadrupling in our energy and material use if current trends remain intact. This is the Mordor economy. In my opinion, the longer this economy continues that, the more likely it's going to result in one of these other categories. This is called The Great Simplification, which is the name of my podcast, and it's what I'm advocating for, which is a smaller, more local, more sane, more rational, more community-based, more human economy, but not measured as much as by GDP and how much energy we use. So something like this is what I believe is going to happen, that when we remove low productivity credit, which I haven't talked a lot about right now, but anyone can get a loan right now based on past earnings, but when future earnings go down, it's going to be hard to get credit. With a shift towards lower productivity energy and resources and a return to very viable solar and wind technology, but all in, it's not going to power a 19 terawatt system, which is what we have right now. 19 terawatts is 190 billion 100-watt light bulbs turned on 24/7. So at some point in the not too distant future, I expect a Great Depression sort of economic event. One of the next 3 recessions is likely to be a depression. And that is because for the last 50 years, we've been kicking the can financially. And the fourth category is Mad Max, which is a great simplification where things don't hold together and there's a loss of connectivity and social order. So our cultural conversations are green growth is like 90% of them. And the other 3 categories are very small. Nate's view is this is the odds of the various categories. This is still probably the most likely, but every year, every decade, we continue to grow under this phenomenon. We increase the odds of one of these other things happening. Okay, summary, main points. Long-term growth was not the norm in human economies. We are all alive during a very unique exponential growth period, and all of the masters in finance, the economic laws, the rules that all the governing people in the world pay attention to were all invented in this tiny little red circle of time, which is anomalous for our species' history. Cheap, abundant fossil energy underpins our societies, but we've treated it as this is a stock that we've treated as a flow. We've conflated the proximate drivers of progress and growth with the ultimate drivers. Everyone cares about politics and technology and money as an explanatory story of the human experience. This is all sitting on top 450 billion human worker equivalents of energy, which itself all sits on top of a living biosphere, which we're now exceeding at least 4 of the planetary boundaries, and we're leaving the safe space of the Holocene. As long as growing GDP is a cultural goal, better technology will tend to grow and not shrink emissions and environmental impact. In my opinion, the real energy transition will mostly not be about what kind of energy we use, but about how we use energy and how we relate differently to each other, to nature, and other things. Barring a new boost in productivity from AI or something unknown, growth is likely soon over globally, and the first challenge will be responding to a financial recalibration, because we keep printing money to make more claims on a finite reality. So a lot of my work is we want to bend and not break. But the general translation to the average person is, on average, in the world, humans are going to have to use less in the not too distant future. Not because we choose to, because we're going to have to. Rather than choose austerity, governments and central banks will support consumption by printing and monetizing debt, eventually leading to lack of trust in currencies. The United States is the strongest currency in the world. It has a lot of problems, but all the other ones have worse problems. So I don't know how this is going to evolve, but I can't likely see an official, a Trump or Kamala Harris or anyone saying, we've consumed beyond our means, we're going to tighten our belt now. So it's more likely that we'll create more and more monetary claims. Important, we do not face a resource shortage, but rather a longage of expectations. The average American has 215,000 kilocalories a day of energy use in our lights, our cars, our planes, divided by 320 million people. But our bodies only use 2,000, or in my case, 3,000. I'll ask you, young people and old people, older people, if I ask you the best 5 experiences of your life, how many of them required a lot of energy and a lot of money? If you're like most people, most of them were nearly free. You went camping with some friends, you processed acorns that you found, you played cards and had beer, sleepover with your buddies, time with your family or your dog. After basic needs are met, most of the best things in life are free. This is my dog. She likes me to read stories. And my friends, and I was in India earlier this year, and I was teaching them bird sounds in their area. And all these things require very little energy or money. Renewable energy and technology, they are the right answers, but to the wrong question. We're asking right now to replace 19 terawatts of global consumption with renewable energy. We can and should be scaling renewable energy because it's, that's what we need to do. We can't use fossils forever, partially because of the pollution and partially because they're going away. But the problem is we're trying to replace this level of consumption. There is a biophysical phase shift occurring in global politics, alliances, and agreements, and we're moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world where the United States was dominant for the longest time, and now there are many other countries that want a peace, and many other countries have what's our oil doing under the sand in Saudi Arabia, sort of conversations are starting to increase. Climate change is not the problem, but it's a symptom of a much larger dynamic called ecological overshoot, but it's just one of many problems that we face. This complex predicament that I'm telling you today cannot yet be voiced in politics and media. Some of you are smiling, you recognize this scene from the great movie Don't Look Up, but what's happening is the mother of all cognitive dissonances. Jared Diamond talked about cognitive dissonance in his book Collapse, where he said there was a dam that was about to break and people 3 miles downstream were not that worried about it. But people right under it, no, they were very worried about it. But people right under the dam were not worried about it at all. Because for them to be worried about it would make such a massive impact to their identities, their lives, their jobs, their decisions, that it was too emotionally uncomfortable to manage. And I think as a culture, and I talk to billionaires and politicians about this stuff all the time, and I just see it and I feel it, that people intuit that this is true and this is generally correct. And in private over some beers, they will agree, but publicly they cannot remotely say what I'm saying in this presentation. For obvious reasons, they wouldn't get reelected. So our current resource tech balance sheet can power a great culture and civilization, just not this one. Okay, ways forward for society. I got about 10 minutes left, más o menos, I think. So what do we do? And what's the answers? Well, first of all, there are no answers, there's responses. But what to do depends on a zillion things. First of all, for who? What to do for who? Rich, well-off countries and people? Materially poor countries and people? Non-humans, other species and ecosystems, the unborn of our species and all the other species. There are different solutions and responses depending on your value system and your perspective. So we are somewhere between those stars. And that suggests to me there are three distinct timelines for work on these issues. There is the right now business as usual timeline when we prepare and do things. There is the bend not break moment to make sure that we stay in the great simplification and not the Mad Max. And there's tons of projects that I'm not going to have time to talk about today, advanced policy. There's lots of things there. And then there's a lot of people are working on this, which is what does a sustainable society look like? Ecological economics informs this. What do we really need and how do we get it? The problem is there's a big speed bump between now and that vision, and we need more people working on the miracle happens in the middle sort of thing. So what do we do? Well, first of all, what should systems aware humans, like many of you in this room, do? But before I ask that, this is not all on you. This is not all on us. There's many, many different actors in the world that need to play a role in this. Upstream from what we can do as ecological economists, there needs to be some sort of global governance to avert nuclear war because the Fourth World War will be fought with sticks, not with weapons. And this is like real front pressing urgent. I don't advise you to listen to this morning's podcast with Jeffrey Sachs, but the US and England are really pushing the Ukraine situation, and it's beyond my ability to speculate, but people historically in our species have not fought nicely when there were inflections of resource availability. We also need to change what the aspirations are. GDP is not leading to well-being for most people, for a lot of people. It is true that when you have very little, more energy and more money leads to a direct increase in your well-being, but that caps at around $70,000 or $80,000 a year in the United States and around 100 gigajoules per capita globally. We use 3 times the energy as people in Italy or Japan, yet we're just as happy and just the same on the Human Development Index. So there needs to be an inclusion of other things other than dollars in our cultural aspirations. The prices are wrong. First of all, we don't include the price of externalities, and we don't include the fact that this stuff we're using it millions of times faster than Mother Earth sequestered it. So we should tax non-renewable things from the source, out of ground, coal, oil, gas, copper, anything that's non-renewable, fossil water aquifers. That will make stuff a lot more expensive, but it will send a signal to innovators and developers, oh my gosh, this energy is really expensive. We need to find a way to use it better in our innovations. And it will send signals to us, the people that use products. I don't want to spend half of my salary on that. I'm going to conserve. The problem is if we made all this stuff 3 times more expensive today, it would crash the economic system. So the answer is have this prepared. Ecological economists can prepare such a map and use it as a blueprint for when the economic system crashes and oil's $10 a barrel. That's when you put in such a tax. And that's what I meant, the bend versus break moment. We need advanced policy and people thinking about that, because a lot of the policies that we talk about today have no chance. The policies that a group of people like you would recommend that would be helpful to the planet and our society are too extreme for where the current political conversation is. So we need advanced policy, which is educating wood future politicians about what's going to be needed, doing scenario analysis ahead of time so that there's understanding, constituency, blueprints, and plans for when they are politically viable. Okay, downstream, this also isn't on all of you. We need a cultural shift away from keeping up with the Joneses or the Kardashians and comparing ourselves on a relative basis to others instead of recognizing how absolutely wealthy we are. I flew here and talking to my old friends and other humans sharing my knowledge. You know, I mean, we have at our fingertips the knowledge and connectivity of the entire human race up to this moment. And yet we're miserable because the other guy has a bigger truck than you, as an example. In my case, I wouldn't care, but so we have to have a conversation about what is sacred. What parts of our world, what parts of our local ecosystems are off limits to the superorganism? This is something that we need to wake up and play a role in and take a stand. We have to recognize that we don't need all this money and stuff to be happy, and we need more people living with pilots and examples of this. I want to be like them. Well, they're not spending a lot of money. Exactly. I want to go. Well, imagine this. Imagine all houses were removed overnight in the United States and were replaced, and they gave all of us a tent and a really good sleeping bag. People would be pissed off until they realized that everyone else had tents and sleeping bags, and we would all just kind of deal with it as one of many examples. This is a picture of the Cave of the Hagens, which is 15,000 years old. We've had a lot of different social contracts with humans. Syntagma Square, the Magna Carta, the US Declaration. What we need to be doing now is finding out the mitochondria of what will happen, what will come after the superorganism. Okay, so there's upstream and downstream. What should system aware humans do? We need a lot more people working on these two categories instead of where most of the people are just assuming that growth will continue. The problem is that everyone in this room, well, maybe not this room, but the room I was in last night, you're wearing three hats. One is your job, your business. You want to get a salary, you want to get promoted, you want respect in your business. The other is you want to live a good life with your family and do things in your local ecosystem. And the other is contribute to a better futures for humanity. Our economic system does not allow someone to wear all of these hats at the same time right now. Most people just have to wear this hat. No offense to Josh, I just wanted to push with that. And we're not enabled to express our desires and our heart in these things. We're sucked into the superorganism. Technology has to change. One of my categories is called Goldilocks technology, which is not too hot, which is some drone that drops off donuts at your 7-year-old's birthday party, or not too cold, which is stone tools. What sort of technology will we need in coming decades? Here's a short list, giving the framing of everything I've expressed today. We need to be conscious of energy inputs, because if energy doubles or triples, our technology is not going to be viable. We need to be conscious of the ecological impacts. If we have ecosystem services priced into things, that might help, but that's also a nuanced conversation. Simpler inputs, shorter supply chains, higher percentage of circularity, affordable and scalable. Who the hell needs flying cars or needs to go to Mars? We need things that are for people that protect ecosystems. And most importantly, relevant to the great simplification, because if a lot of our technology is just assuming the great accelerationist movement in the next 100 years that we're going to have implants and robots and all this groovy stuff, it needs to be relevant to a human scale future. And this needs to happen in tandem with the superorganism. We need to kind of wall it off a little bit and have these two systems functioning simultaneously, because this is going to be really hard to kill or maim or muzzle because it's so powerful. The rich and powerful can't affect this yet. It's going to change, but it's going to change with a reaction to some crisis or event. So we need to be building out these other ways of living in tandem with what's going on. Every community needs libraries of healings. There's still a place in Vermont and Burlington called Stone Soup. Yeah. So when I was here, we would go there and, you know, just anyone could show up and have some food. And I think we need places of community convening in every town in the United States and beyond. But the mental health implications already are staggering, let alone the things I'm talking about. Every community needs a library, not of books, but of healing, of ways to meditate, to nourish yourself, to have music and dance and community. I just spent 2 months in Oroville, India. The entire community lives on $7,900 per capita. They're among the happiest people in the world. There's hundreds of musical things on every week that you can go to. And I'm not glamorizing poverty or India or anything, but it's a different model. Everyone has electric bicycles and no one needs cars. Now, this is India, of course, and the problem is, of course, in a climate justice situation, they didn't burn any of the fossil carbon and it's unbearably hot there, so that's an issue. But there are models. I felt, I'm going over, so I'm just going to tell a 1-minute story because it's relevant, especially to young people. When I left India, on my way to the cab, I went to get my bags and there were 4 dogs, which I had been feeding, like all wagging their tails. They just actually wanted food, but I felt like they were saying goodbye to me. I walked to the cab, I got a 10-person hug from the people that I had been teaching. They wouldn't let me get in the cab. They were like walking with me. And for like 15 minutes, it was embarrassing. So I get back to Minneapolis and I had parked since I was gone a long time, 45 minutes away. And I got on a shuttle with 14 other people. We had a 1-hour drive. No one said a word to anyone else. They were looking on their phones the entire time. It was such a culture shock. So we need to wake up and start living differently with respect to this. And I have a few more comments on that in a few minutes. Simplify first and beat the rush. And if you simplify first by using less energy and materials now, you will feel like you're at a disadvantage because others will not do that. And they will be still schnoffling at the fossil smorgasbord. But there's a short-term cost versus a long-term gain. And I expect Europe is going to have to face a simplification before the United States because of energy and financial and because of Russia. And will that be a net bad for them or a net benefit? Because when they have to deindustrialize and use less stuff, the United States will still be going up, but they will have time then to develop new degrowth, post-growth models when we won't. So is it the tortoise or the hare? But as young people especially, I would advocate simplifying your wants early on so that you don't get sucked into having a boyfriend in Portugal and a 5-bedroom house that needs all kinds of natural gas and heat, etc. We have a complex global just-in-time supply chain that spans 6 continents. As energy gets more expensive and as credit becomes less available, this system is going to shrink. So one thing we need to do is nearshoring, which is localizing and regionalizing supply chains. Instead of getting stuff from Korea and Bangladesh, maybe core key things here and some more goods in the broader circle, as an example. Okay, so a few minutes left on what should individual humans be doing, especially young humans, given this framing. First of all, avoid the consensus trends. There's stuff in the media, there's especially stuff with TikTok and other social media. Figure this out for yourself. Don't believe what I told you. Try and research it, talk to others. Most importantly, talk to others and find other people to support a logical, coherent worldview, because we are marketed 24/7 with different objectives in mind. And I know, I used to feel 20 years ago that I was in the extreme bubble and everyone else was in reality, and now I've realized it's exactly the opposite. Is people that have put together this synthesis generally are tethered to reality, and it's the 24/7 CNN, Fox News stuff, that and the advertising on football games and all that, that's the real bubble. Develop skills. You're developing really important knowledge and integrative knowledge here at the university, but also find a skill that could, in coming decades, be useful to you or your family or your community. Lots of different things. Humans don't need baseload energy. We are baseload energy. So as the average American uses 100 light bulbs worth of energy, and the first couple will power a laptop or a cell phone. But our current cultural goal is to have more and more, but we need to, right here is plenty. We don't need all the energy and stuff. So we don't have a true resource scarcity, but a lonage of expectations. Especially for young people, find the others. I don't have answers to what's coming. And if you talk to someone your own age or any age, and you process these things, what happens is it reduces your cortisol, which is a stress hormone. It boosts your helper T cells, which is good for your immune system. Just the process of talking. Right now, our global economic system is a runaway train. We're shoveling coal and oil into the engine. Find the people in the dining car, at least. And I would suggest find 3 groups. Find one group that you just love to hang out with and have fun with. Find another group that you're intellectually aligned and curious about the world and ask questions that are intellectually engage each other. And the third is find some people that share whatever you think is sacred in the world, and you do stuff with meaning together with them. Sometimes it's the same group, all those people are one group, but in my life, that's 3 different groups. Nourish yourself, prioritize yourself, your own mental and physical health above these other things, and then help others and do other things. The next technology is inner tech, not outer tech, but the inner tech of our minds. And right now we are alive during this incredible dopamine smorgasbord. We have to grow up and be able to value things and have a higher purpose in life. I've never had less money than I do right now, pretty close, but I've never had more meaning and purpose in my life. My podcast is #1 in the world in earth sciences. I'm having conversations with some of the best humans and thinkers on the planet. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. You don't know what you're supposed to be doing yet. And it took me 58 years to get to this point, but it's a journey. Be kind and be bold, because kindness and smiling and small acts of kindness. I just gave a really grumpy African lady at the hotel a $20 tip when she wasn't looking, because she was just having a bad day and I felt like she needed a little boost. So bad, something good happens and it triggers some positive string of events. When you don't know what's going to happen, wend your way towards something of meaning. This guy and I wrote 3 books together. His name is DJ White. He was the co-founder of Greenpeace International and Earth Trust. When he was your age, and I assume many of you in the back row are in your early 20s, he lived in Indiana. And he was a geologist drilling for oil, but all he knew is he had a passion and obsession with cetaceans, whales and dolphins. So he's 23, he bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii. And 15 years later, he was the single most successful environmental activist of our time, and no one even knows of him. Here he's doing yoga to leading, the female dolphin is leading him in yoga that they would do every year, every day. She would choose Bach or Beethoven, or they had 100 different musical choices. He started by cleaning out dolphin poop from cages, from aquariums as a volunteer. And then he did more, and then he did more. He single-handedly stopped drive kills in Taiwan. He did the flipper safe tuna with star-kissed. He's got lots of environmental success stories. He had no idea he wanted to do that or that he could do it, but he deeply, deeply cared about dolphins, and he moved closer. He took one step in a direction. He took a trip to Hawaii, and that's what his spirit called him to do. So move in a general direction towards that. Give yourself a 24-hour vacation from other people and electronic media in a place you personally find meaningful, and there's a lot of those in Vermont, and ask yourself, who do I wish to be in this life? Why do I wish that? And how might that be made real? The answers are for you alone, but at your young age, you'd be glad to have them. Do something for the benefit of someone else that nobody else, including that person or animal, will ever know, and examine closely the feelings that this causes to arise within you as a first step in sorting social motivation from personal altruism, especially at a young age. As the metaphorical water in our society rushes faster, consider yourself being a rock in the river, an anchor, because a lot of people are not so tethered, and when the water rushes faster, the rocks will tumble downstream. You can be an anchor to other people around you in this community and going forward, and if there's enough rocks, we can redirect the flow of the water. A lot of people are saying, don't eat meat, don't fly, drive an electric car, blah, 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 all this stuff. That's fine. That's good personal hygiene to do these things. But now is the time to maximize your impact on the planet, not minimize your impact. If you minimize your impact by doing those things, it's good preparation for the future, but you're just 1/8 billionth of a little bit smaller problem. I burned a lot of carbon to come here, and I'm doing 4 presentations in the next 3 days. I'm trying to I'm trying to maximize my impact on the planet. So think about maximizing your impact given in the sacredness on the service of life. So we have arrived at a species level conversation. We are the first members of Homo sapiens to be able to integrate all of this, understand where we came from, how we got here, what we need, what we're doing, what the global Earth balance sheet is, what the technology is, what our goals are. And this conversation is accelerating. And the stakes are no less than power or life. When a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. Thank you.